said, as she always does on Sunday mornings, "Hello, Pastor, how are you?" I said, "I'm just fine, how are you?" And she said, "I'm fine, but I want to change the song." I said, "Okay." And she said, "What?" She wanted to change the song because she felt this particular song, "We Are Witnesses," would do a better job helping us to understand the sacred text of the day. And I say, thank you, Jenny, for the flexibility to change the song. And she was right. I don't know what the other song was. I never heard it before, I don't think. And if I have, I apologize. Okay, I have. But did you hear what they say? We are witnesses of what? We are witnesses of the resurrection of Jesus, right? God has entrusted us with a story to tell that changes lives. And I would believe that our lives this day can be and will be changed because we will see and experience God in a different way. Because we will see and experience God as a community of faith. Amen? Amen. Amen. And sometimes when we experience God, it blows us away. And sometimes we don't understand. But the truth is the truth. God always walks with us. God always has a message of good news. And God will always help us go through the journey, not wondering if we are loved, but showing us over and over and over again that we are loved. I have to tell you, the story of Doubting Thomas is one of the only stories that is read each and every year in the life cycle of the lectionary. The lectionary, again, is a tool that the Christian church uses so that we can study the whole of the Bible, just not passages that we're comfortable with. And this year, we're studying Luke. But during the Easter season, we always hear from John. John's sacred story. And there's always question, well, why did John think it was so important to include this particular story or that particular story? And what is John's slant on that story? And hopefully this morning we'll unpack that in a new way together. But I have to tell you, I love the story of Doubting Thomas. John referred to him as Didymus, the twin. Did you catch that in the sacred text? But it's interesting that we don't think of Thomas as the twin. We think of him as doubting. Doubting is that the resurrection had happened. And you know what? Let's give Thomas a little bit of a break. If you saw somebody walking around that you had witnessed went through a barbaric death, well, before that, a barbaric trial by the temple authorities and by people that were supposed to be his friend or their friend, and then you saw them beaten and nailed to a cross, if someone told you they come back to life, you'd probably say, as I would, have you bumped your head, or what drugs are you taking, or what wine did you drink this morning, right? Because it is not within human experience at the time that Jesus showed himself, right? And did you notice that the group of people that Jesus did show himself to, what were they doing in their bad self? They were all hiding in the upper room behind what? A locked door, right? Now, you know I'm not one to ever stay in the closet about anything, right? So I would be saying, come on now, get out there and see what's happening. But the disciples were afraid. And you know what? I think it makes sense that they were afraid. I imagine that their fear came from not that Jesus had died, but that they themselves would be gathered up by these authorities and held accountable, just like Jesus was. And why would they be held accountable? Because the disciples were known for following Jesus. The radical person that God entrusted to bring healing, to bring unbelievable miracles, that people would be fed from just a few fish and a few loaves, that a woman at the well would be given permission to know that she is loved, and then told everything she had done. And then reminded again that the living water that she would be offered is the water given by God. The water that would never run out. The water that is there for us as well today. So I think instead that Thomas is the realist. Thomas is just doing nothing but being authentic. He is being real. And did you also notice what Jesus said to those fear-ridden disciples hiding behind a locked door? What were the words that Jesus uttered to them? Let's say it together. Peace be with you. And all of a sudden, it's like their fear just fell away. Did you notice that when Thomas said, "Oh, I'm not believing this. I have to see for myself. I have to see for myself." Thomas doubted. And yet, that doubt did not cause Thomas to be criticized. That doubt and skepticism that Thomas was willing to vocalize would probably be the thing that God would use, that Thomas would come to faith. And did you notice that on the 8th day, when they were all locked in the room together, this time with Thomas, because Thomas was not there the first time, what were those same words that Jesus uttered? Peace be with you. And then Jesus said, "Oh, you need to see for yourself? I get that. Here are my hands. Check them out. Here's my pierced side. Go ahead. Put your hand in my side." Now, any human being would be outdone by that, right? And Thomas was outdone. And what does Thomas do in response to God showing up in the person of Jesus? The text tells us that even when he had doubt, Thomas came to believe. And he uttered the words, "My Savior and my God." We all think, sometimes as people of faith, that doubting, proclaiming that we don't understand how God works in our lives, that we don't understand how forgiveness happens, we don't understand how things could be a certain way. And yet I believe that when we give ourselves permission to doubt, that when we give ourselves permission to admit that we don't understand, when we give ourselves permission to know that we don't have all the answers, when we can come to a place of being teachable, that is God's opportunity to enter in and to give us exactly what we need. Not to be right. And let's be clear about that. God doesn't give us what we need to show our superiority over anyone, or to say that we knew the answer. God shows up in ways that we can what? We can believe. We can believe that God is going to give us what we need. We can believe that there is a higher being that loves us more than what we could ever imagine and shows up to give us what we need. And just like Thomas, we have a new opportunity to proclaim, "My Savior and my God." That's amazing. That God cares enough about us to give us what we need. And I say, as people tell us what they need, that we can celebrate that. And that we should be cheering people on as they grow in their faith. And when they come with doubt and fear and skepticism about whatever might be happening in their lives, may we keep our opinions to ourselves. Right? But may we encourage people. May we encourage people by reminding them that no matter what they're going through, that God loves them more than what they could ever imagine. And MCC Richmond, I would ask you that instead of giving your opinion, that you would instead utter a prayer. A prayer of thanksgiving that somebody is being real and honest. That they're risking telling you the truth about their lives, about their journey. And what greater miracle could we do than to believe in faith that God will answer that prayer? Because I believe that God will. And why do I believe that? Because of doubting Thomas. Thomas needed for God to show up in a way that Thomas could understand. It might not be the way that you or I could understand, but it was a way that Thomas could understand. I've been pondering this week, what is it that we need in our lives to be reminded of the living Christ? To be reminded that God walks with us, especially in our doubt, especially in our need. What is it that is going on in our personal lives that rocks our boat into the way that we might have behavior that is not who we are? That we might say things and do things that we really don't mean. But out of frustration and fear and doubt, we are willing to blot out a lot of things that just don't make sense. And sometimes as we do, we sabotage ourselves, or we create brokenness and pain that we don't believe. And you know what? That brokenness and pain, sometimes we have to save face, we have to keep it going. You know what I'm saying? Of course you do. Because most of us have been there. That's the joy of doubting Thomas. That's the gift that we have been given. This week also, I want to share with you some things that have happened just this week at MCC Richmond. Last week, I shared with you the various ministries that we have that are ongoing in this place. And I shared some names of people that were participating in those ministries. And it was my experience that most of you came to me and said, wow, no wonder we're so tired. And also, with that phrase came, oh my goodness, I read the bulletin every week. I see what our record of attendance is in the various ministries, but I never stop to think about the effect that those ministries are having on people's lives. What a joy it is to be in a church that I believe is having a spiritual revival. Revival is not coming. Friends, revival is here. It is here now. When I came to you 3 years ago, you wanted change. You wanted revival. You wanted a church that was busy with the business of God, not the business of drama. And we have gotten ourselves busy. Some people came in disbelief. One person, when I first came, said to me, you know, Pastor, I had every intention of making sure you got here and making sure you were comfortable, making sure you had a place to live, and then I was going to bail on MCC Richmond. And I was like, what? And I'm here to tell you, that person has not left. That person is still here. That's the miracle. That's the miracle of just simply showing up and asking God to do things. Just this week, I heard a story that you just have to hear about. I have been praying for Carol Anderson for a couple of months, at least. And she asked me to pray for her retirement date because she felt ready to retire. And then she announced her retirement Tuesday night at Babes. What a better way to do it than with her dancing, right? But here's what she told me. She said, you know, you didn't know the dates in which I had selected to retire. You just knew that I was praying for a retirement date. And then the leaders in Richmond, LGBT leaders in Richmond, had been asked to post on Facebook the date, 9/28/19. We had been asked to post that date because that is the date of Richmond Pride this year. We were also asked not to give any explanation, just post the date. Carol said, she looked at my Facebook and she was like, ah! She ran to Dell and she said, look at that, look at that. And Dell said, well, did you tell him the date? And she said, no, he didn't know. God used that to confirm for Carol that her retirement date is, Carol, what is it?
9/28/19.
That, my friends, is how God works. When somebody asks for a prayer, an earnest prayer, wanting discernment, wanting to know the answers, God showed up for Carol. None of us had to know what it was about, but God showed up for Carol, and that is indeed the date. Les and Henry, yesterday we watched them get married, and oh my gosh, what a joy it was. I shared yesterday in that wedding ceremony that one of the joys of doing their marriage counseling, and I always insist on doing marriage counseling, because there are certain things that over my 20 years of ministry has taught me. There are some certain things that people struggle with in marriage, and sometimes those struggles bring you to a place of disillusionment. Now, Kirk, please close your ears because I don't want you to hear all these things. But as they met with me, there came a time when they got very real with one another. And they both shared secrets that they had never shared with anybody. They had been committed to one another for 7 years. They had hid painful experiences of their lives because they feared being judged and they feared rejection. And you know what happened? In my office, as they dared trust each other to be vulnerable and honest, they shared those things. And then I said to them, ooh, please go home now and experience what your relationship has in store for you, that you now know that you have hidden nothing from the other. And they came back, and lo and behold, they were surprised that they were able, it strengthened their relationship. They were able to be more honest with one another, and they both said, God met their need. They no longer have to be in prison to these thoughts. A miracle, an absolute miracle, don't you think? Last week at the food pantry, Jerry walked in. Jerry is somebody that comes each and every week. He walks with a limp, and yet we see him during the week collecting recyclables out of garbage cans. He had come in about, a month and a half ago, and he said he wanted to move. I said, Sean is your man. So Sean gave him a list of all the places where we would recommend that homeless people or low-income people go for housing. Then Jerry came back and he said, I used your list, and now I have these papers to fill out, but I cannot read. So we sat down together and filled out those papers. Jerry is now moving into, this is his words, I'm moving into the high-rise, Pastor. And I said, well, where would that high-rise be? Over there on First and Marshall. And he said, for the first time in my life, I will have an apartment furnished, and it even has air conditioning. Wow. Now, here's the deal. If we didn't have the lounge, we would not know that Jerry had that need. We were able to enter into Jerry's life to bring God to Jerry in a way that Jerry so desperately wanted God to show up. And guess what? God did. God did. And he is moving, and I'm going to be asking you to help him with towels, and he needs pots and pans. And he said, what would I do with a pot and pan? I was like, oh, Lord. But we will get to enter into that with Jerry, and his life will be transformed because of the love of God and because of your love to make the food pantry happen. We also this week, last week, we received a $500 grant from yet another community partner because they're hearing what we're doing at the food pantry each and every week, and they want to be a part of that. That is the third grant that we have received from a community partner for the lounge and the food pantry. Aren't you excited about that? That God continues to remind us that God will show up because we believe. We had doubts, but we believed that we could have a viable ministry. There was a lady that came into Living Wednesday last week, and if you know the way we do Living Wednesday, we start in a circle. I ask them, what have you brought to church tonight, and what is on your heart? And then people share. And then we do Living Wednesday. At the end, we make a circle again, and we say, what do you go home with tonight? Last week, a woman said to us that she had drove 40 minutes to get to MCC Richmond that night. She came here on Easter Sunday, and she couldn't believe the love that you gave her in this place. And she said she had been hungry for this kind of love, for this kind of community. And she said, I'm so grateful that I have found you. What do you think about that? God showing up to meet me. God showing up to meet a need in a way that she could understand because of your faithfulness to be loving and kind. And I'm not done. One Monday night, early on, as Leslie, Kendall, and Greg decided, Sherry Baxter and Robin had done that ministry for a long time. And so they needed a break. And as soon as they told me, it's done, solved. They've got a break. And we want you to rest, Sherry, because we know there's something else that I want you to do in this place. But Greg and Leslie and Kendall were doing the bread ministry, and they're just as happy as a clam. I've never seen 3 people work in a unit as they do. There's something for us to learn in that situation, right? But then Leslie said, you know, we are so amazed. I said, what are you amazed with? And they said, we have never been to an MCC as large as MCC Richmond. There's miracle number 1. And then she said this. When we walked in the door, we were not asked any questions. We were welcomed, we were greeted, and people invited us to lunch. And then she said the most important thing I have ever heard. She said, and you know what? Every MCC we've been to, we've sniffed out drama, and we have not sniffed out drama here. And I said, thank you, Leslie, Kendall, and Greg, for helping us realize this. And then they said, and then you have allowed us to integrate within the life and ministry of this church. And I said to them, why wouldn't we? The reason that people do not integrate into ministry is because of drama. Because it will run. And I say exactly what was said at my installation service here. If you need to be about drama, leave it at the door. It is not welcome in this place. You are welcome here, but drama is not, and we are better without it because drama is not from God. But again, we have heard and seen how God shows up in our need. And so Sean is going to help us with some questions. This morning I would like to leave you with these thoughts. Questions for consideration of doubting Thomas. Here we go. Question number 1. If you had missed Jesus' first appearance to the disciples and only heard about it secondhand, like Thomas, do you think you would have believed, or would you have wanted to see him for yourself? What do you think? What do you think?
I need to see it for myself.
You want to see it for yourself? Yeah, that's right. Thank you for being honest. And you know what? God will show up and show you the near pair's hands. Sometimes it's through a prayer request like Carol. Sometimes it's through an application like Jerry filled out. Sometimes it's hearing the truth of people that you love as they get married. Sometimes it's hearing about the effectiveness of your church and your ministry. And sometimes it's just being willing to admit that you can have doubt and brokenness, and you can be skeptical, and God still embraces you. And then the second question, what do you think Jesus means when he says, blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe? That's a tough one. I believe that Jesus was not scolding doubting Thomas, but that John put that sentence in there for us to be able to realize that God has things for us. All we have to do is ask. And then the sacred text goes on. Jesus did more things that are not written here. And that's what we do. That's our goal. Jesus was instead talking to us and all those who would read from John. And so if you don't believe, if you have doubt, if you have fear, know that it's okay. And know that God will meet your need. Keep your eyes open. Because it may not be through the nail-pierced hands. It just might be through one another. And through you, the faithful people of God, who are entrusted with the message of divine inspiration. And MCC Richmond, let's allow the revival to continue and change us and mold us into the people that God wants us to be. Amen? Amen. Amen. Let's sing and celebrate.